Let's go back to the CDS. Prior to start with the topics and just paste the link in case if it's not yet pasted in the chat. I just wanted to quickly summarize the topics that we're going to basically pivot for Quincy release. And well, as Lance already mentioned, that there's been some recent changes in Upstream, and those have also impacted the dashboard team. So we've lost a lot of colleagues, and mostly from SUSE. I see Tatiana here. So hey, Tatiana, nice to see you back here. So that's also impacted our rates, our ability to deliver new stuff, and well, that's it does reconsider our current focus. So one of the things that we are going to try to do is focus more on ease of use, usability, rather than perfectly mimic all the features that Ceph provides. So we are trying to take this lean approach. So rather than providing everything and keeping pair with all the features set that Ceph provides. And we're also trying to bring some workflow-driven usability. So right now, the dashboard is basically a set mimicking most of what Ceph provides. So we want to change a bit that approach and provide also a workflow-guided way of using the dashboard. So that basically would mean, like, for example, we want to bring the cluster install wizard, an upgrade wizard. For example, if you want to start using RGW, then you would have this workflow wizard that is guiding you towards all the steps that you need to perform. So that would be more or less the change in the mindset. Let's see what happens to that. I think it's ambitious, but on the other hand, we need to streamline a bit the development. I think that may help us to focus on the quick wins that there are in the dashboard. And the last topic, I think, is what we call the lean dashboard. So it's basically removing everything that it's in excess that we can hardly cope with it. So trying to define the clear areas where we can grow the dashboard, and also this also has a lot of impact on the back end and the more of a cleanup refactoring thing. So perhaps it's not impacting as much to the user, but we will need to do this back office work in order to improve the code and well how we develop the dashboard right now. So those would be the three main topics that would guide the approach for our next year. Hopefully, I will share my screen. Let me know if you see my screen, please.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So the first topic, there is a long list here, and it's just an hour. Now it's less than an hour, 3/4. So first of all, we are going through the Pacific issues. There's been a couple of things that have been recently been changed in Pacific, or not so recently, but they are there and they might impact the status of some features. The first one is NFS, especially the V3 version. And specifically, Alfonso has been working on this recently, so I'm not sure, Alfonso, if you want to give an update on this area.
Yeah, regarding this, when writing configuration from dashboard, we have currently a configuration that is orchestrator made and the user-defined configuration. So currently I'm working on polishing some issues with the user-defined configuration, but the question here is, provided CFDM is the official deployment tool, should we favor orchestrator configuration or should we still allow user-defined configuration?
So
it's an open question.
Yeah, I know.
So for CFDM, I think it's the best idea to, I don't know, don't support NFSB3 by now. I mean, we can add support for it, but that takes add some complexity to Ceph ADM. So the idea was to just drop it for now. And then we have to decide what we want to do with the dashboard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should just drop it.
Sorry, Sage?
I think we should just drop it. Yeah.
Yeah. This is one of the ongoing works that we have to do, is to remove the ability to select the V3. Although there are some, I don't know if there are some requests from potential users that they are still with legacy clients that works on V3. So this should be stated that if this is to be backported or Pacific, and Quincy should be stated that V3 is officially deprecated.
Yeah, there were some discussions, and I'm happy to see here Federico, because there were some basically downstream customers and scenarios where I guess legacy systems, HP UX, I think I remember that didn't have support for V4. So some specific kind of users, customers may need to.
Well, not just ancient. Mostly it's ancient platforms like. I'm not even sure if HPUX got to 3. I guess it maybe did, but more interesting might be Windows. There's a
Windows
V4 client, and there are in fact quite a few users of NFS on Windows, believe it or not.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's the primary reason. It's as we look at the migration of the Gluster customers to Ceph, we're going to see the Windows users talk about V3.
Okay, so this protocol should be allowed to be selected when an export is user-defined, then?
Well, I don't want to define what you guys are doing upstream because of downstream requirements. I was here just to celebrate Lens, and we can talk about what downstream needs separately, but right now, just plan what seems right for upstream.
I think we should have a conversation with Jeff Layton, because the reason why, well, aside from the complexity in Ceph ADM with dealing with V3, it's that what I understood from him was that we really shouldn't be supporting V3 because the failover stuff just like isn't reliable, isn't safe. Doesn't work.
Yeah, the turning on V3 means that you accept all sort of compromises that you wouldn't if you just stuck to V4.
Yeah.
You have an inferior HA model, and I can't remember what the other constraints were.
Yeah. Anyway, okay.
Okay.
Well, maybe you should hide it instead of disabling it. I guess if we're going to have to re-edit downstream windows.
Yeah. Well, right now, as Alfonso mentioned, there are two ways of configuring NFS in dashboard. One is coming from the legacy way of doing it, which was without any orchestrator. So the dashboard itself was accessing to the Ganesha conf and the exports conf files in RADOS. And that's still working. So technically, if someone wants to deal with that, that's there. So the other thing is that that's conflicting Ceph ADM. So as long as you install or configure the dashboard to use Ceph ADM, that's not available. Dashboard changes completely the way of configuring those files. So yeah, that's the main thing here.
Okay.
Yeah, not sure if the case. Yeah, please go ahead, Alfonso.
No. For example, I was looking at a comment, for example, from Borkel, remarking that even for Octopus, P3 is not working correctly or has some issues. So maybe we should state that for using V3, the recommended release should be Nautilus, and then from Octopus on to allow only V4. I mean upstream wise, or how to proceed here?
For Ceph ADM, we decided to not support V3 because there was no real use case.
Okay. But this
But if
is
it turns
starting
out that
from.
there is there are many ways we can support V3, right? We can add some fully fledged V3 support. I don't know if that's going to be the best option. We can do we can provide some kind of a workaround to make it work. On the other hand, I don't know how upgrades are then going to properly work. So we have to find some kind of middle ground, I guess, between hiding it for users and still supporting it if there is a real use case.
Yeah, as far as I can remember, so Sebastian, so you could configure V3 by means of these config files in the monkey value, right?
Yeah, you can override the Ginger 2 template, right, to make it work. But that's going to be problematic if you're upgrading the cluster.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be zero coding effort for V3. I would propose to postpone it to a different meeting.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Let's leave it for a later meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is the other big topic where I think it was mostly discussed yesterday in the orchestrators meeting. So probably we can also think later offline for this, for the HA proxy. Yeah. Okay. So regarding this one, the end-to-end workflows, this is basically what you go follow the tracker. Basically, you can find there. This is a list of usability improvements, and so this has been mostly driven by Paul Kastner. Let me share the file. It's basically a series of blueprints, mockups, and designs for bringing a couple of workflows. And also, Juanmi, you have also been involved here, so feel free to give your inputs. I think this is the link for the installation wizard. Yeah, please, Juanmi.
No, it's just I think that I think that in past summer we were working in this kind of things, okay, in order to propose some high-level workflows in order to improve user experience. And basically, we detected three, four big areas, okay, where we can improve. One of them is the installation wizard in order to make easy to install a cluster, okay, and to replace what we have in downstream, for example, in the previous version that it was I think that the run, it was a graphical installer based in Copit, okay, and to do something similar. This is one of the areas. Another thing is about, for example, OSDs and storage devices management, and we have I think that for the installation wizard for the OSD management, we have documents in the documentation in the dev area in the future plan, okay. And a part of that, several usability improvements about, for example, host maintenance, about make easy to replace OSDs, this kind of things, okay? Part of the work is done and is available. And I think that basically, I think that, in my opinion, there are two areas where we need to improve. One is OSD and storage devices management, and the other one is the installation wizard.
I was trying to look, Kwame, for the documentation where this.
I'm going to put the link here in the pad. Okay, one moment.
Please, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the main issue with the installation wizard is I mean, we've been double thinking on this one, and this is trying just to bring parity with the old cockpit installer which basically provided an install from scratch based on Ceph Ansible. But the thing is that now with Ceph ADM Bootstrap, it's not clear where to start right here, because the cluster, some of the decisions are already made, and so that would be a lightweight wizard. There is no need of a end-to-end wizard as the cockpit installer. So yeah, we'll need to check exactly where this wizard makes sense. And so one possibility is that it basically starts after the bootstrap phase. So as soon as this first node has been deployed with the mon and the manager, the user enters the dashboard, and there is a wizard popping up there. So the remaining steps can be driven by the UI. But then the question is, what kind of steps are we waiting for that? I mean, finding the cluster to other hosts, adding hosts. That's basically what this the link that Juanmi pasted. Yeah, there. I think it is. Juanmi, do you have at hand this link to? Yesterday you shared your link to the OSD wizard, right?
Yes, it's inside that.
It's inside this one? Okay.
Yes.
Can
you see storage devices and OSDs management?
Okay. I see that. And there wasn't a similar one from Paul for the cluster install, or?
Yes, I think so. But I'm trying to locate it. Okay. Maybe let me check.
Well, it was basically I think a series of mockups for selecting the nodes. We were talking about how to filter nodes by labels and different ways of selecting the nodes. I'm not sure even if that was finally merged. Okay, so well, let's move to the next topic, and we can go back at this one if we find it. In any case, I think that's, well, basically the workflow expected here would be just to add more hosts, and also define the kind of services that you want to deploy on host by using labels or whatever. So that would be more or less the steps that we would expose in this installation wizard. So regarding the cluster upgrade, as far as I know, there is support right now from Ceph ADM for okay. Detecting that's basically container driven, right? There is no so what's going on here? Are we waiting for upgrades into the images published in the registry, or what is this? How is this working?
Right now, a user needs to know when to issue an upgrade.
Okay.
You can just always use the colon latest tag. So we probably don't need to request the latest tags from a registry, because we just can upgrade to the latest version. Yeah, it's still a small workflow gap that we have to notify the user when to issue an upgrade. But the upgrade itself is implemented.
Okay. So the only thing left here would be just when to trigger that upgrade, right? When to detect that and how to. Yeah, I'm curious. Is the because I assume that some of the hosts would need to enter in maintenance mode, or how is this handled from Ceph ADM?
The cluster stays online. I mean, Sage implemented that. It's just one daemon after another is going to get upgraded or updated, and the cluster keeps working, and everything works.
Okay.
You can even, I think you even have a nice progress item in the dashboard already.
Okay, so there is a progress event generated for that.
Yeah. So you just need to start the upgrade and hope for the best.
I think probably the main gap would be a command at the orchestrator level that's like Ceph upgrade list or available or something that shows what available versions are. So you can just pick one. And probably a start one that's -- latest that will just pick the newest and start.
The problem with querying the registry is that not all registries are allowing that.
Yeah, we might have to have some other file sitting somewhere, like on the Ceph website, that just lists available versions or something.
We might be able to just query fetch the latest tag and compare it if it still matches what's currently deployed in the cluster. And if it does not match, then we could issue some kind of information book that an upgrade is available, even without querying the registry, but just downloading the latest image.
Yeah. We can talk about this separately.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. And does this only involve the Ceph images or also the monitoring ones, the monitoring stack ones?
Currently, the monitoring ones, or as soon as that pull request merges, we're just going to be sort of tied to a particular Ceph release. So as soon as you're on version 12 or whatever version of Ceph, there's a specific version of the monitoring images that it will install. And also get automatically upgraded too.
Great, yeah, because my next question was if there was a kind of bundle just to ensure that all the images were aligned. So, okay, that's aligned to the Ceph version.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, next topic is this usability improvements that I mentioned. Most of them have been provided from Paul Krasner third analysis on the dashboard and usability, so there are a lot of interesting stuff. They are very small tasks, and we are progressively fixing them. So, but if you find anything, for example, I remember yesterday, Sage, you mentioned the inventory versus devices, so we can. This probably would fit here if it's not already here. So this kind of need fixes are there. So that's mostly then regarding the usability and end-to-end workflows. So on the multi-site management, this actually covers multi-site, purely multi-site, and also multi-cluster. Currently, regarding RBD mirroring, I collected these issues. They were opened by Jason. So currently, this is the gap with the RBD mirroring support in Ceph master, I think. So right now, the dashboard only provides pool-based and image-based snap mirroring. So we need to bring also the snapshot support. I remember Jason mentioned that the pool was going to be deprecated. So it's not here, no. And basically also the enabling and disabling of the RBD images in order to do the mirroring. So probably the RBD mirroring is the most complete mirroring or multi-site feature right now in the dashboard. Then there is the RGW multi-site. This has been our plan since Nautilus. So right now the dashboard supports this Grafana dashboard. So at least there is some monitoring dashboards, and the status of the replication can be kind of followed from them. But the idea here is to bring also a wizard just to configure the multi-site, especially since there is no multi-site configuration in Ceph ADM any longer. So yeah, this has also some dependencies, and also related to what we were talking yesterday about the RADOS admin ops and how to trigger the configuration of the realm zones and etc. from the dashboard. So let's see. And last one to come was Ceph's mirroring. I'm not familiar with this one. I don't see Patrick here. So is this following more or less the same approach as the RBD mirroring? There are FFS mirroring daemons and just launch that and
Yes. Yeah. So it works the same way. The daemon works the same way that the RBD mirroring one. You just basically launch it or n of them, and they just do their thing. And then it's just a matter of basically enabling and disabling it, configuring it on various volumes or subvolumes. And that I don't quite remember exactly how that's configured, but you should set up a meeting with Enki, I think is the one who's doing that. But yeah, the Ceph ADM orchestrator part is really simple. Rook supports it now too, so it's just you basically just turn the daemons on. That's about it.
Okay. Yeah, so hopefully we can reuse most of the code from the RBD mirroring this part, and yep. Okay, great. And the last topic here is the multi-cluster. This is something that has popped up in many of our face-to-face meetings, and I don't see Jeff here because he's a great supporter of this. But the idea here is that from a single dashboard, you can manage multiple Ceph clusters. This is something that is potentially feasible because the front end technically is just an application running in the browser, so it technically could be directed to its backend, and technically it could switch from backend to another, but it needs to be tested, and that also would be a very basic implementation. So
it would have to be the same version of stuff
installed
onto the cluster, though, right?
That's true. Yeah.
I wonder if it's simpler just to have like a something where the clusters are linked, and then you can, if you select the other cluster, it just opens a new tab at the other cluster's dashboard. Or something like that.
Good thing starting Pacific is that we now have a versioning scheme in the API. So at least if there is some mismatch between the front end and the back end, it will be the error will be triggered, but it will be more intuitive than before. So we could catch this kind of version mismatches.
Yeah. My question here is this multi-cluster feature. Comparing the priority with the other RDW, RBD, or CFFS, to take lower priority, right? Or not? Okay.
In my mind, it would be lower priority. But
okay.
Not necessarily so.
Well, I don't know if Federico has any strong opinion here or not.
I'm not here, guys. The downstream discussions are for downstream meetings.
Okay.
I'm just listening.
Yeah, so it would be helpful. I'm not sure if Mike is still here. I don't think so, right? So just to wait for the next Ceph survey and check, what is the number of users using RBD mirroring, RDW multisite, and Ceph's mirroring, just to better know that. So do you have any idea on when is the results of the 2020 are going to be public?
I can give you a little bit of data on that. I don't see a problem with that. So
Okay.
RGW multi-site is by far the most common. RBD mirroring is not used that much. I think multi-site is by far the most common geo-rep that we are seeing in use.
Okay.
Okay.
And are the use cases tied to some OpenStack or some specific integration, or are they just RGW users alone?
The RGW multi-site is just RGW users. There is no OpenStack connection.
Okay.
I suspect the RBD mirroring users are tied to Kubernetes clusters.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not certain about that. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, and there is full integration with OpenStack, but we're not seeing that much in terms of actual use because of cost. So the RBD mirroring is picking up on Kubernetes, but that's also theoretical. It's not seeing much use yet.
Okay, thank you. So next topic is RGW. I think yesterday we already discussed a bit about this, so probably we can skip. This is something that's been in the backlog also for a while, and we definitely need to bring this to the dashboard soon. And I think also Alfonso is going to commit with this, right?
Yeah. It's an area that we plan to try to add all these features that we talked about yesterday. And well, when we arrive to the performance scalability section, can talk about pagination, but later.
Yeah. Yesterday, I remember that Yehuda mentioned something that I think we have discussed in the past, which is converting the dashboard not only in the Ceph admin console, but also in a RGW specific. I'm not sure if there are other thoughts or views on this. I don't see that really fitting because, well, that basically would imply that all the RGW users need to be dashboard users and would only see the RGW packets of that user. So what are your thoughts about this? I could assume that he was, comparing this with the AWS console, right, or something. So I guess that there you perhaps can have a specific console for tenanted users.
High level, this would be desirable. I think this is an analog to AWS console in the longer run.
Yeah. Okay. We might explore this. Another connection with users. At the bottom of the agenda, there is the Ceph X management, and that would also bring some other kind of users to the dashboard. So, well, we might try to review the different kind of users that live around the dashboard, and perhaps try to align them to actual dashboard users or map them. Well, we will keep that.
My opinion to the Cephx use are Cephx is a very developer-oriented approach. At least when caring about the Cephx use of the different Cephx queuings of the different daemons, it's something that only developers are really interested in or should be interested in. I don't know how much sense it makes to integrate Cephx into the dashboard.
But for external users of Ceph, they are required, right?
Yeah, I guess I think the exception would be setting up like client queuings. If you want in order to mount the Ceph natively, you need to set up a user and a key.
Yeah.
So that part would be good.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about this with Paul and Juan. Perhaps you remember exactly what was the use case for configuring this. I remember Ceph Ansible support this kind of configuration, right? Of external clients.
I would really make it depending on the use case and not a general Cephx management page, but really focus on what use case do you really want to support and leave everything else away.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, we'll take note of that. Yeah, as a workflow, right? So after you create or enable some specific component, you export the. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess the way I would think about it is focused on client keys. I don't think we want the dashboard allowing you to muck with the daemon internal keys.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, then it's 15 minutes to the hour. It might take a bit extra, but let's try to keep it short. So next topic is monitoring. There are a few requests coming from trackers, disease. So we've seen users requesting to have persistency on the Grafana dashboards, or at least being able to configure that. right now, as soon as you restart the, at least this is happening in master, restart the container, you lose any kind of configuration that you made to Grafana. And we've had some users asking to whether they could keep their changes there. And what are your thoughts here? That led us to funny conclusion that we could store the Grafana database within Ceph. But yeah, not sure why.
The problem is that you don't have access to the monitoring if your cluster fails.
Yeah. It's I think it's kind of connected to the same issue as yesterday when talking about the logs, right? Storing the logs in Ceph is also, I mean, if a pool is not available, then you cannot store the logs. So
yeah.
Let's say on one hand, I'm not very supportive of this, right? Because if a user screws their dashboard and the Grafana dashboard, I mean, with the current approach, just by restarting the container, you get the fresh Grafana, so there is no issue. But if we persist that, then we are complicating the. I think we have to put a line where, where we want to bring customizations and no further. So no big, supporters of this.
No, one middle option would be maybe when you restart the content to have some way to tell that you want to purge, and then you have the original dashboards or not. But if you are able to pass something like purge, then you restart the original queries that are safely checked in the upstream in our jobs, and then you can make the user aware that he was tweaking some query, he was breaking the thing. Otherwise, if we are not able to pass this kind of purge flag, then we are exposed to potential bugs that maybe are not bugs, are just bad query tweaking, as you pointed, Ernest.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a strong view here. On the other hand, we could simply store, as for example, in previous versions of Ceph Ansible, I think the database, the Grafana database, was volume mounted, so you kept the status of Grafana. But that will only work with a single instance. So if you want to deploy multiple Grafanas, there is no shared status. So, but probably not a big thing right now. And
from the Ceph EDM perspective, what would imply this persistence of Grafana and alerts?
I think the first thing that we can do is in this moment, the Grafana database is in the container, okay? So if we restart the container, we lose the customization. So the first thing that we can do, that is the same that is doing Ceph Ansible, for example, is mount a folder in the host in order to persist the database, okay? But this has a bad thing that we cannot move the daemon between hosts, okay? So this opens the door to new things like HA for the monitoring stack, okay, and how to store the database and the configuration of the monitoring stack in a common place where we can always access, okay? So I think that in first place, we can't just follow the same strategy that we have in Ceph Ansible, is my opinion. Okay, is and mount a folder in order to store the Grafana database in a host.
Yeah, and also, in fact, the shared one point would be tied to the high availability of the monitoring, which is the last topic, and yeah, probably we should have first talked about that. Okay, I guess for the customization of the alerts is more or less the same thing. We've got, some requests on users. They don't want, for example, to have the near full ratio on the, I'm not sure if it's the 80, but perhaps they want to lower that to 70% or something. So they want to tune that. It's more or less the same. I'm not sure if we want that level of customization, because it's going to complicate the board debugging, etc. So,
well, I think that probably the customization is something that we should tackle in upstream. Okay, maybe it's not something that is going to be important in downstream. But for sure, my opinion is that in upstream we should provide this kind of possibilities.
Yep.
Probably need a longer discussion about how we would address
Yeah.
that.
It's super complicated to have a common configuration across all the different HA instances of Grafana also. We really need to find a good solution, right? A good solution that works without storing the configurations in RADOS.
Yeah. I would in fact rather, lean towards, if we find that alerting threshold is the default is not ideal, just to change it for everyone rather than having everyone modifying that.
Can we follow up with an email thread on that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, next topic here is the native widgets for, basically this means removing Grafana. So Grafana is complicating a bit the deployment, the monitoring stack, etc. Also, the networking is not ideal. We are embedding Grafana with iframes in the dashboard. And when you mix that with HTTPS and different domains, it's a hell of a configuration. So it usually ends up with users not seeing the Grafana because of self-signed certificates not being approved, and it's a real mess. So there's been different discussions here. One was having a proxy. So basically, the dashboard is acting as a proxy, and Grafana dashboards actually proxied by the dashboard. So the end user only fetches the dashboard from a single URL, a single host name. The alternative would be to have native widgets. That would also allow for better integration with the dashboard. So we could have widgets everywhere, not only in iframes, and also console check the Prometheus stats in every place. Downside of this is that would be exposing Prometheus, which usually don't have SSL or TLS security. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's also ideal, but
that reminds me of Openmatic, right, Tatiana? So in Openmatic we started with custom widgets, and then that didn't scale. So we ended up with implementing a proxy for Grafana, and that wasn't great because Grafana didn't really want it to be proxied. And the third iteration was then to have it just embedded as an iframe. So we went through that experience in Openmatic already and ended up with what we right now have. I think custom widgets is going to be an option, right? But that's a ton of work.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't do it by ourselves.
Okay. So your learned lesson is just the opposite as this move, right?
Yeah. That's what we went through in Tatiana. If I'm not mistaken, right? We Openmatic we started with custom widgets and then replaced them with a proxy for Grafana.
Yep.
And that was really painful. As far Patrick really had fun with a proxy.
I think he left a comment in that tracker No, not in that one. There is another one for the proxy. I will look for that later. And he mentioned with the proxy mode of Grafana, you cannot access Grafana in a standalone mode, so you lose the ability to check Grafana separately, right? It can only be accessed in the...
I don't know the details.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we may have, for this kind of things, we may try to have POCs just to see how feasible they are, pros and cons, and yeah, let's see. I recently was checking, and it seems like the library that we are using for charting, Chart.js, supports, or there is a plugin for directly hitting Prometheus. So technically, it couldn't be that hard. At least we could access the data source directly, but the other thing is that we have to configure all the rest of the fancy UI that Grafana brings. But yeah, perhaps for simple widgets, it might work. Okay, and last topic in the monitoring team is the high availability, and this also has been a long-standing topic. So we've had a series of discussions around this topic, basically bringing high availability to each of the monitoring components, Grafana, Prometheus, and Alert Manager. And Alert Manager, I think, has its own high availability model, right? It's a gossip-based clustering. But is that already set in Ceph ADM? If the count of the Alert Managers is more than one, are you setting these settings or?
We are supporting multiple instances of everything, but there is no real HA as far as I know.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can have some kind of HA if one instance fails, and you can reconfigure the dashboard to point to a different instance. I don't know how far Kiefer was in adding that.
Yeah, I remember the cluster config options for the alert manager as well. Basically, it was for electing like an active alert tier or something. So only one node was sending hooks, hook events or alerts, basically. So that was mostly the thing.
I think the alert manager itself is in a proper cluster of hosts of daemons, but I don't know regarding Grafana and Prometheus. I think that's still not properly working.
Yeah. With Grafana, what we were talking in the past, and same for Prometheus, basically as they are HTTP based, was having a HA proxy and optionally also keep alive for doing that. So I'm not sure how this would be aligned with this HA in Ceph ADM discussion.
Thanks.
I haven't considered that one, but I mean, if it's an HTTP or HTTPS endpoint, then it should just work. It's a question of just figuring out how it should be deployed.
Yeah. Main approach here would be just to, in case of, I guess, if the count of diamonds is more than one, deploy the HA, right? Because otherwise it's not usable. At least Grafana, and I think same for Prometheus.
I mean, Grafana itself is basically stateless, right? So
Yeah.
So if there's more than one, we can just pick a random one and use it, right? When that'll work.
Except for the Grafana database.
For the Grafana, sorry?
Database.
Yeah. In case it changed, yeah.
So if you do custom changes in one Grafana instance, and we are persisting the Grafana database, and we are failing over to a different one, then the custom settings are gone.
Yeah.
So Grafana is actually, with that pull request from Paul, Grafana is a stateful service by now.
Yeah. Okay.
I was wondering about this ad hoc workaround about the store several amount of URLs to instances. Maybe with the refactor that implied to allow a dictionary like of dashboard settings. I don't know if you can store there several, well, the desired URLs. I mean, as a temporary workaround. Meanwhile, we find a more consistent solution.
You mean storing a dictionary in a module option,
Yes,
right?
well, here it is said that is implement a solution which allows to store unlimited amount of URLs, serializing the data. Well, as a temporary workaround, it could work to adapt this. So, for example, if you set up several instances, you can find the first that is reachable, and if this goes down, you can reach out for the other ones. I mean, as a temporary ad hoc solution.
Yeah. The other thing is that for the case of Grafana, that basically ends up with a URL. I mean, it is the user, the browser, who has to decide which Grafana instance is consuming. So I don't know. I mean, how to do that.
Well, this is yeah, that would imply some refactoring on our side in order to proxify this Grafana access, yeah, through our backend. Yeah. But maybe this belongs to another discussion or a more detailed session meeting.
Yeah. Anyone interested in this topic? Yeah, please feel free to, I mean, step in and we are having these discussions around high availability for a while. So yeah, it's not closed yet, this topic. Okay, let's switch to the next theme, which is the observability. We have the topic of log aggregation. I'm not sure. Yesterday there was discussion on cluster logs. I'm not sure if there is a desire or there's been some traction around this because I mean, basically this would mean having centralized logs for Ceph, more or less in the same way as we have Grafana. We may have Kibana or, well, another stack for centralizing logs and processing logs. Is this something that we have had requests for in the past? There's been some.
I think there was some request for doing that at SUSE, but that was not that important as far as I remember.
Okay. There is no upstream tracker, right? Just to check. I'm looking for that. No, I don't see that. Was this supported in OpenATIC or?
No.
Okay.
No. What the user experience when using Ceph logs? When deploying Ceph ADM daemons, I really got a lot of feedback that just searching the logs for errors when deploying services was really not usable. So for Ceph ADM, I ended up with a different way of providing errors that are specific to specific instances, like daemons or services, in a way that users don't need to look into the log file. I mean, right now there are plenty of important error messages in the log file that we should show in the dashboard, right?
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm not too much into it, but currently the logs for example, the OSDs in Ceph ADM, they are not, they are going through journal or they are stored in, okay. Everything would be in journal.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember in the past that there was a Graylog exporter or something for the logs in Ceph. I remember using that for aggregating a while ago, but haven't tried that in a while. And also, Alfonso reminded me that Graylog is deprecated, so.
We have
Logstash.
Logstash.
Yeah.
We have a very new pull request that directly writes Ceph logs to journally.
Okay,
directly from within the container to the journality of the host. But this one.
Can you paste it?
Could someone follow up on the point about Graylog being deprecated?
No. Not Graylog.
It was Logstash. Okay, it was
Logstash was deprecated. All right.
My mistake. Okay. Well, the Graylog collector I see is deprecated, but we have a built-in, right, exporter. At least I remember something like the Graylog config setting. Yeah, there is a graylog.h file in Ceph. Well, in any case, yeah. Thanks, Sebastian, for sharing that. Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on this. I think it might be interesting. So if there is interest on this, please let us know and we can prioritize. All inputs are going to help us to better arrange the backlog for Quincy. So, okay, next topic is telemetry. I'm not sure if Jared added this one or who was. I think it's interesting. So I don't know if currently, maybe Sage, you know this, telemetry is recording how many modules are enabled, right? So we can track if the dashboard is enabled and how many users are using the dashboard. Is there such a thing in telemetry?
We know that the module's enabled, yes, but I think that's all. My suggestion here is that maybe we should just count like which URLs or which pages in the dashboard are being used. Maybe like a count or something, just so we can tell like what parts of the dashboard users. I mean, this is really up to you. Like, what would be useful for you to know? But
Okay.
Seems like something as simple as like what pages are being used and how often they're viewed or whatever would be feedback. Yeah,
we've been talking about the possibility. This is sensible issue. The possibility of embedding an analytics on open source one, not the Google Analytics, in the dashboard, so we could have at least information on how the users are using the dashboard, like from a usability perspective, hotspot in the dashboard, this kind of feedback. Perhaps we could try to integrate this in telemetry. I'm not sure how to retrieve that, but maybe it might be interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. From the data, at least from the dashboard config settings, we can kind of infer what specific components a user is. For example, from the RBD image counts. I'm not sure, but yeah, there are specific settings in the dashboard that from them we can infer if a user is using that in the dashboard. But for a more clear, report, we will clearly have to add something. The thing here is not to be, intrusive or, that the user may feel that they've been spied by adding cookies or something. So yeah, we will have to try to be very open about this. Even there's this work on enabling telemetry, this banner, and there's always this discussion on how to make it, on one hand we want to, proactively encourage users to enable that, but yeah, we don't want to really piss them off by insisting. So we were recently talking with Jared about how often we should display again this notification after minor upgrade, or maybe every 6 months or so, in order to remind them that there is this telemetry program and they may join them.
Yeah. Yep. I guess maybe this is separate, or maybe it isn't. I wonder if a similar report on the API, the dashboard API, since that might have external users too, just like which endpoints are being used, what their hit counts are. Something like that might be interesting too.
Sorry, how's that?
Just counts on how many times the backend API.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I don't know if it's possible to tell whether a user is a dashboard or something that's non-dashboard, but it'd be interesting to know.
Yeah. I was thinking, I think in the Prometheus exporter recently, Patrick added some metrics for that. So now Prometheus has metrics on the use of the Prometheus exporter, or at least the latency is taken there. So we may try to think on something like that, on the usage of. Yeah, we'll.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. Next topic is performance and scalability. This is linked also to a discussion that, Josh mentioned during the RADOS CDS on the manager improvements. Right now, specifically from the dashboard side, we are focusing on, the first tracker is just a list of the critical endpoints that we consider that may have scalability issues. Basically, OSDs, RBD, RTW, those are the ones that we have found that may scale larger and might bring some bottlenecks. And the first topic there is bringing some caching. So right now, Perry and Watt are working on this topic, exploring that, and they are benchmarking the behavior of the Ceph dashboard with, I think Perry mentioned today that he was trying with 4,000 OSDs, and it seems like, there's a noticeable down degradation. So we'll, start working on this, on bringing this. And the other big topic here is because the caching is not going to solve everything. So bringing the pagination to the dashboard. Right now, most of the queries retrieve all the data from the backend. So for example, the other day when Alfonso was demoing the cluster configuration options, from these 1,000 or more than 1,000 ones, all that list is retrieved. Even if only the basic ones are displayed, the whole set is retrieved. So having this kind of pagination, filtering, it's definitely going to help a lot on reducing the scalability issues. And Avan, I think you brought in this topic, so I'm not sure if you want to add anything about this.
Just mostly about it. I just want to point out especially the filtering, because we recently also bring in the filtering for the RGW buckets to have the query parameter for something called stats. So that we can brought up for the RBD OSD list, image list, or snapshot list that can have, because there is enough payload, so to just load on that single page, we can just maybe we can do something like on the single page, we just have to load the specific list. So we already know what info the columns want in order to display those. So we can just have those payload in the API. And what we can do, we can just call the full list only if we go in the details of the particular OSD or RBD. Else we don't want to query the whole list for just that. So I think the filtering I support more as a more priority before the pagination, because that will not benefit for the listing.
Yeah. Main issue with this is that it's going to involve a trade-off in the dashboard, because we will have to sacrifice some of the current features. If we add pagination, that means that we're retrieving all the data set from the backend. And for example, the filtering, the searching is going to be limited. Right now, I mean, you can, if in the search box in each of the tables, as soon as you start writing something, you get all the information, all the rows that are matching that. If we put this in place, as there is no way to create a database from the backend information and use indexes or so for that, we will need just to, I mean, perhaps you can only search by OSD ID or some specific fields that are coming from the OSD map or that don't have this kind of scalability constraints. So yeah, but this is definitely a topic that we have to plan for the near future. So I hope that in Quincy we will see some pagination in place, at least for some specific controllers like RBD. We were talking, Alfonso, we were talking about, for example, RGW. That also is very linked to the backend. So I'm not sure, Matt, yesterday if you mentioned about, for example, retrieving all the buckets or objects, having some kind of way of paginate that, retrieving an index or an iterator or something like that, so you don't really need to retrieve all the info from the from RADOS or wherever you are getting that, and you can iterate that instead of having the whole data set every time that you. Is it something that there is working in RGW for that?
You're talking about buckets and things, or listings of buckets and so forth. Absolutely, all of the S3 protocols and where it's relevant, I think the admin ops APIs work in terms of markers, which are like cursors.
Okay,
the APIs already, so you have a built-in.
So there is current support on the admins API and our implementation of S3 as well, right?
I believe that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. The protocols are designed for this because there's always likely to be lots more objects than you can handle in a single ACP request efficiently.
That's great to know because we're exactly talking about this. So okay, next topic is the REST API, but I think that's a pretty broad topic and there is no clear agenda for that. So it's just to share that there's ongoing improvements on the REST API side. For Pacific, there's been the huge leap that is meant to have a stable version API, also documented. And everything else, I think it's about improving that rather than a real breakthrough. So next topic is the lean dashboard. Let's quote that. That's basically the idea of trying to rethink how the dashboard is code bases and the current approach and try to find reusability patterns and things that we can do for reducing the code base. Right now, I think it's we have 100,000 lines of code in the front end, I think, and 30,000 or so in Python. So that's huge amount of code lines, and we clearly have to, reduce that if we want to survive. And we also that also multiplied by three upstream releases, and plus Quincy. So that's a lot of code we have to take care of, and things that we're thinking on. It's, for example, and this is more a personal taste. I'm not very fancy or very supporter of UI as coding out of stuff in UI. I think it's most of us, and that means not only dashboard developers, but also, core Ceph developers are used to Python, but not to front-end technologies. So having to code in TypeScript, JavaScript, Angular for extending the dashboard, I find that as a usually roadblock for everyone that wants to approach the dashboard. So trying to bring some of the UI stuff into the backend, into the Python-based code base, in my opinion, I think that may help developers to start playing with the dashboard and contributing.
Doesn't that impose performance and scalability issues, though?
Yeah, well, the idea is that right now, for example, the dashboard has a lot of visual patterns that are more or less the same. So most of pages are a table. The table has a form. So those components are hard coded. So instead of hard coding the tables, etc., having a generic component, so you just provide the metadata of that component from the backend, from the Python side, and the front end all simply displays that metadata. And according to the metadata and the data coming from the backend. I don't think this would have an impact on scalability. It's not trivial. It requires, thoroughly thinking about this, but I think it can help us to at least reduce a bit of duplicate code in the dashboard. There I mentioned that, for example, forms in JavaScript, there are thing called JSON forms. So there's no standard for having a backend driven UI, but there are some moves on that regard. Like, for example, defining forms in JSON. So you can have the JSON generated in the backend, and the front end is only responsible for the presentation and the passing of the information. So let's explore this move. And see what happens. And also there's a collection of trackers here, basically refactoring the navigation bar, also with replacing that with a JSON generated hierarchy. Also the UI controllers, which is basically this metadata. So the UI controllers are basically telling the front end how to interpret and also giving hints on the validation. Like, for example, in the pools controller, what pools are in the backend created, so you can perform the validation with existing pools and avoid duplicating pools on this kind of functionality. And more or less the same for CD table selection, models. So that would be about generating UI components. Alfonso, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, well, it's not a trivial move, but yeah, we can explore it. It's mostly on our side.
Yeah, I think it's worthy, but well, we may discuss internally, at least do a POC just to see how it impacts the dashboard. And okay, next topic is cross-component interfaces. And yesterday we quickly talked about Juanmi has left exchanging, for example, information between Ceph ADM and dashboard. Basically, for the sake of we're talking about the service spec. We are using the service spec to display the different. Well, we are not using the service spec. We have the service spec hard coded in the dashboard. So if there is a change in the schema or the structure of the service spec in Ceph ADM, then it's basically out of sync with the dashboard. So one possibility would be to basically use this schema or the object itself or the class itself to create the presentation. So by means of inspection. We are currently doing that, for example, for the manager modules management section. We are taking the dump of the manager map dump, and we're using that dump to generate the structure for the different manager modules, the type that these modules are accepting for the options, etc. So having this kind of approach can help the dashboard to be always in sync with other components, like, for example, Ceph ADM. So there is a reference to, Pydantic is a framework for Python to enforce typing at runtime, and also allows to export JSON schemas from the structures. So, it's I think it might be useful for this in case we want to do that. And as long as we are using classes, we can rely on inspection. So if we are directly working in the same manager and Python subinterpreter, we can simply inspect or import a shared class between, let's say, service spec or whatever, between Ceph ADM and dashboard, for example. Any thoughts on that? Any ideas?
From my side, it's related to this is about when we do in our API test this schemas verification about what is returning or what we getting from manager or from monitor. This kind of things that I think we should revamp all this way of managing JObject, J schemas that we have in order to only to decide a modeling for this schemas verification that is not only by dashboard but all components. So for example, if in some component, for example, you are adding more info to the manager that maybe is not relevant for the dashboard, we don't have to tweak every time the schema that gets verified. I remember that recently Sage was adding some new field and he was forced to tweak our schema in our API test. So I think that we should reach out the consensus for all the components to have to model this schema verification. So something that is not impacting the dashboard, the schema remains okay. And if you are removing a component that is explicitly checked in our API test, then you should put as a reviewer the dashboard team in order to be aware that something that was exposed in the front end is being removed from the backend. So how about modeling this schema verification for API and also for orchestrator or cross component?
Yeah, I mean, regarding REST API, we have there's a PR for adding this type check, runtime type check, so we can detect.
No, my question was more open to orchestrator team or Sage in the sense that in order to be more flexible, the API test, so you can add information without altering the test, or if you remove it, then is it explicit in our test, then we should put as a reviewers then. For now, for example, in our JSON schemas or object schemas definition, we are putting allow unknown true when something is adding some fields or data that is not explicitly checked. We can make improvements there in order to make it more flexible, more reliable. But maybe we can start ourselves this work and put other components as reviewers, and if we are okay, go forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. I think Juanmi was interested on this topic, so enforcing types and having this schema. So we may discuss with him. I don't see here Sebastian, so maybe he left. I'm not sure if you were expecting an answer from him. Okay. That's about the cross-component interfaces or data sharing. About hardening, this is kind of related. So we have started trying out this type checking, runtime type checking. Right now, the API was only type checking is enforced only not at runtime during either via MyPy or during the QA tautology runs. There is basically a helper infrastructure for checking the types of the responses. So we want to replace that with a runtime checking and having the types of the responses actually checked. That could be the thing there. And also regarding Grafana JSONs, I don't think everyone is in agreement with this move, but if you check one Grafana JSON, you will see a lot of boilerplate, a lot of data there that it's hard to follow. Also, the PromQL expression is not easy. It's not very fancy to process. So the idea there would be to, I think everyone is leaving, probably too much. So message. Basically replace the current JSONs with a Python generated version. So we could have these very simple Python files that generate a complete Grafana dashboard JSON. So this is based on a library from, Grafana lib is called. It's a Python library. I think it might be interesting to explore that. As said, currently the Grafana panels, the JSON files are not very well tested. So we always find issues like recently we had a contributor from upstream sending a PR modifying the queries, and we have to manually test that, and it's hard to tell exactly the impact of those changes. So these kind of assets, I think it makes sense to have them. I mean, tested and
also Grafana has the natively support for scripted dashboard, so you can declare with JavaScript. Well, the same way, but instead of relying on Python, we can rely on JavaScript itself.
Directly on JavaScript. Yeah. It was not for adding another language, but I mean.
Well, provided the front end is TypeScript, but yeah, it's an alternative. Just rely on something that is already made by them.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if we want to carry out this POC as well, I mean, we may try different alternatives and see how they are compared to each other. So, okay. And last one, in the Lean dashboard topic is a backporting helper. This is something we have discussed in the past when a developer or someone from the backporting team has to bring some code back to an older release, Nautilus or whatever. I mean, usually have a lot of issues with conflicts, etc. So having at least a kind of guide, but ideally perhaps a script or something just to detect issues, because as most of the dashboard is based on TypeScript, JavaScript, HTML, some of these issues are not even detected at runtime or real time or whatever. So, for example, if you define or you bring some class that is a CSS class that is in master Pacific, but is not defined in Nautilus, no component in the chain will complain about that. So you will end up with a class that didn't exist in a given branch, but is there, and we've seen that. So that's already happened. And having a kind of maybe a linter, some kind of tool for helping on debugging these backporting issues is something that we may consider for that, especially given that we have now to backport to 3 different branches. So that's quite a lot of stuff to take care of. Okay, and that's all regarding Lean dashboard. Then we have open topics. So first one, I think this was from you, Alfonso. So if you want to go with it.
Yeah, this was discussed in a previous CLT, and it's regarding all the issues that we have trying to make the code compatible with different versions of different dependencies across all distro supported releases. This is quite complicated, so it was approved as a proof of concept to provide a virtual M for dashboard that could be delivered also production ready. So you can pin a version of a package and rely on that pinned version in your virtual M, regardless of it is available or not in the distro release. So you can rely for sure in that version, and your code can work perfectly with that version. So you don't have to worry about if it's a distro it is, but it's a former version or an upper version, or directly it's not available. Simplifying our lives mainly. And yeah, we will as soon as we can, we should proceed at this. But yeah, it's an enhancement.
Yeah, this is specifically tied to the fact that we're now delivering everything in containers. Technically, we have control over what there is in a container, and yeah. Okay, next topic is Ceph management. I think we already covered that.
Yeah.
So the idea would be perhaps to explore the that as a workflow, so we can export the keys on per component basis, and that's all. Maybe listing the list of keys in a component in a page or something, but yeah. And the last one is the dashboard self-test. So the idea would be to implement the self-test hook that it's in all manager modules. So the dashboard can be self-tested. So perhaps, for example, if a user finished installing the dashboard, most of the time, if they want to validate that everything is working okay, they have to log into the dashboard, navigate the different pages, and hopefully they won't see any red pop up. So that will mean that everything is okay. But instead of that, it would be to replace that with a single CLI command, so they can run a Ceph self-test, whatever dashboard, and just run a series of tests or checks to see that everything is okay. Like there is connection to Grafana, there is connection to RGW, etc. So I think that's an interesting idea, can be useful for users. And last topic is, well, we have a couple of projects for this year's Google Summer of Code and Outreach programs, internship programs. So the first one is the visual regression testing. This the idea of this is that right now, for example, for detecting issues in the UI, basically visual mismatches, styling issues, defects, these kind of things, they always require manual inspection. So someone has to log into the dashboard, navigate the different pages, and see if everything is okay. So there is no misalignments in the text or issues with the colors. So that's, pretty tedious. The idea would be to replace that with a visual testing regression. So that's bringing it's basically based on a screenshot. So we would save some screenshots of the dashboard, and during the end-to-end test, this framework that we use for end-to-end testing, which is Cypress, would perform some matching between the saved screenshots and the actual dashboard. So we could detect these mismatches instead of having to do that manually. That's the first project. And the other project is basically the ability to report bugs and improvements and any kind of feedback from the dashboard itself. So instead of forcing users to go to the Ceph tracker, they would get a context-sensitive form or something. So as soon as they hit an issue, they could open that form and send an issue report to the tracker. And that's the other one. We have candidates working or preparing for work on that. So I think we may have these two things completed this year. And that's mostly it. Did I miss anything? Is there any other topic that you want to bring in or discuss? No? Okay. Well, in that case, I think that's more than enough for today. And we still have 20 minutes before the next CDS meeting. So thank you very much for joining. And let's have a break before that. Thank you for joining. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.